Hey guys, this is GKCS, and today we have our very special recurring guest, Yogita Sharma. In case you haven't checked out her channel, Yogita creates content on software engineering and especially on system design. Please do check out the channel Pseudocode. It's in the link in the description. Also, of course, it's tagged in the title itself. So, Yogita, do you want to say hi to the audience?
Yes. Hey everyone, I hope all of you are doing well. And here we are again with another topic. And I'm very excited to do this collab with Gaurav. So I think let's get started. I hope you are ready to start with the interview. See what I did with the words there. Okay. So I see it on your resume that you have worked in quite a bit in fintech domain, and I think it would make much more sense if we discuss a problem around fintech. So let's see, how can you explain the design of UPI systems that have been built for payments, and if you can explain a high level architecture of how that system works, and then we can dig deep from there in one or two of the components. If you like, maybe you can start by just giving a brief overview of what the system actually is. I'm pretty sure that the audience would already be aware of it, but it's worth it to just maybe give a brief overview.
Okay. So, when it comes to the UPI system design, UPI stands for Unified Payment Interface. The objective of UPI, one of the objectives, was to take different payment interfaces which are exposed by banks, maybe payment wallets, and in general any transaction capable system, and unify them. So as a
Okay.
government, this is the ideal place to come in when you have many private entities creating different systems, having different behaviors. As a government, you can step in and standardize this so that the end customer, the users, can have similar behaviors for any kind of a payment or any kind of a transaction. This is also true in case of Aadhaar. It is also true in case of when any large scale project is picked up by a government. So when it comes to, let's take an example. Let's say HDFC Bank has a particular way in which it accepts payments. So you need the details of the user, and you need to somehow
Yeah.
prove that this user is actually wants to make this payment. And ICICI Bank has a different payment interface.
Mhm.
Now, one of the things that we can do as an end user or as an app, let's say there's an application which takes payment from one to another, is to
Okay.
connect with this API and mention to them that I need to make a transfer between these two banks. Now, it's not like there are these APIs didn't exist earlier. These APIs did exist, but UPI has standardized them to a larger extent. So now,
Okay. Yeah.
using any address, a person can make a transfer to any other address, without being aware of which bank has it. Do you have to transfer it to? Is it NEFT? Is it IMPS? I think all UPI payments are IMPS. But
Yeah.
a lot of the complexity of the system, usually you are asked the option of, is it a is it an IMPS payment? Is it an NEFT payment? This person, which bank do they belong to? Give me the IFSC code. If they are outside India, then there are more complexities involved. You have to register them as a payee. So instead of all of these complexities, the process has been simplified by standardizing that payment interface, which is called Unified Payment Interface, backed by the government of India.
Okay, that is a very good overview. Now, would you like to elaborate a bit more on addresses? What are these addresses if we talk about them in technical terms?
So these addresses, you can assume them to be something like IP addresses, or
Okay.
when we think about networks, there is a particular place that a message has to go to. So
Right.
they are not physical addresses, but they are addresses which can be referred to, and they are almost like the identity of users, we can say. So one
Okay.
user can have multiple UPI addresses. So it can be Gaurav at OK HDFC Bank. The reason it is OK is because there is, Google can create a UPI address for you. Similarly, I can, if I make it HDFC Bank, by the way, this is not my UPI address. Please do not transfer to this. If I take HDFC Bank, then probably HDFC Bank has provided me this address. One single customer can go out there and pick up one of these addresses, similar to how they can, let's say, purchase an IP address or rent out an IP address. So, when you say that this address belongs to me, what is effectively happening is that some sort of a name server, in this case, NPCI is going to take care of this, I think, is going to, have a list of all addresses being mapped to bank accounts.
Right.
So Gaurav at HDFC Bank, this is over here. This maps to HDFC bank account number 301.
So basically, all these addresses, the virtual addresses belonging to one user, are stored in a huge data store which is maintained and administered by NPCI. Now, how does this authentication takes place? Like, can you explain that when you as a person are trying to send money to me via your bank account, the system has to know that you are you and this is your bank account, and the system also has to know that I am me and this is my bank account. So can you put some light on the authentication process which takes place here between these two addresses?
Sure. So if you mention that this is my address, there might be multiple addresses which are pointing to the same bank account. HDFC 301 might be, I have a Paytm address which is backed by this bank account. That is also possible. When you're sending a request, that request has to be authenticated. The authentication party happens to be NPCI. If you make a request, what you're doing is you're having your signature in this request. So Gaurav at HDFC is making a payment request. I will sign this entire request with my private key.
Okay. And that private key would be?
That private key is some sort of a secret. So this private key is maintained by NPCI. When this request with, let's say, subtract 100 from me and, rather transfer 100 to another bank account, let's say Yogita, when this entire request comes in, this has to be signed by a private key, which is being stored at NPCI's end. So maybe Yogita, your address is in ICICI. So you are over here, and I am over here in HDFC. I go to NPCI. I ask them to make a request sign my request. I get that signed request, and actually I don't get it back. I think NPCI sends it to ICICI, this signed request, and ICICI actually makes the transfer.
So how does the user gets authenticated? So what do you think ICICI would need extra from user to fulfill this transaction?
Yeah, I don't remember how HDFC is going to, how I am going to authenticate that I am a real user with NPCI, because I remember there is some sort of a private key signing which is stored in NPCI, like per user. They have my private key and this signature tells ICICI this is good enough. But I can't remember how I can authenticate myself with NPCI actually.
Maybe think about what is the one step that you have to do when you're making a transfer.
Okay, if I have to make a payment to you, maybe I can open my Google Pay application or any application it supports. Pay UPI number. So let's say I want to pay Yogita. There is also a PIN that I have to enter. Okay. Yes. That's a good hint. I don't know if the interviewer is going to give such a big hint, but okay. So you sign your request using a PIN. That is one big factor of authentication. I guess the PIN is checked by NPCI, which then can send that signed request to ICICI.
Yes, because when the PIN is created, it already considers your card number from your bank, like the credit card or the debit card number using which you have put an account. So NPCI has the that knowledge itself, and your authentication, as you mentioned, is already happening through private key because they have your biometrics and everything, like your bank accounts are linked to your social security number.
Yes, in our case, Aadhaar. In fact,
Yes.
I think I've drawn the diagram a little wrong. This is more accurate. With the mobile phone or with some sort of a device which can give a PIN, I tell NPCI that this is a registered request. This is a authenticated request. NPCI signs it and sends it to both HDFC and ICICI. Now, the benefit of this is twofold. Uh, I made a mistake here again. Uh, I actually send this authenticated request to HDFC.
Okay.
Yeah, and then HDFC sends it to NPCI, which then transfers this signed request to ICICI also. Yeah,
Yes. Now you're right.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because that is the benefit of a unified payment gateway. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense if I had to go to NPCI
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
And NPCI would have to handle the transactions. Then basically every person would connect with NPCI, and the scale would keep on increasing. The problem would keep increasing. This is much more simple. NPCI just has to transfer the request, not get it authenticated and everything. Okay.
Right, right. Since you mentioned scale, and that brings me to my follow up question. Would you like to explain that how actually these systems, NPCI, in line with all the PSP systems, the
Payment service provider.
payment service providers, and the gateways are actually handling the billions of transactions? Like, if you can just give an overview, how all of these systems are able to handle the billion transaction scale.
Okay. So we spoke about users connecting to their bank and the bank having a unified payment interface, and then them getting authenticated with this PIN, the bank sending it to NPCI, which then sends it to the other bank, which the money has to be transferred to. So when we are talking about scale, the scaling problem of banks, of clients, is their problem. Those are private entities. They need to handle this
Right.
themselves. There is a lot of argument about, why should the bank provide a unified payment interface if it's not profitable for them? But there are some things that NPCI is working on to actually make the load lesser. But in terms of how does NPCI scale, it is a single point of failure. If it goes down, then all UPI transactions will stop. Also, every transaction has to be routed through it, which is going to be painful. That's a lot of bandwidth requirement.
Yeah, I was going to ask about, like, can you see any problems with the current system? Like, where can it potentially fail? So as you mentioned that there is a single point of failure. If NPCI is not able to serve request or it's partially failing, then it might lead to many transactions not getting through.
The reason why MPCI here is not clear. I mean, it's not a good architecture from my side, because all I'm saying is NPCI should come and authenticate the request, like basically send it to the other bank. When we are talking about a unified payment interface, it makes no sense for banks to go through NPCI. That is not unifying the payment interface. That is taking the headache on our own side, and interaction with every bank. So ideally, the bank should talk to each other, and NPCI should not come in the picture unless there is something special that is needed. So when HDFC Bank says that I need to transfer money from account 100 to account 200, all this bank needs to know is this a authenticated request or not?
Yeah, the only headache that NPCI should take is the authentication of the user.
Right. So one factor is the PIN, which tells the bank that okay, it has come from a registered client. But what if I go to a bank or NPCI and say that please close down my account? That's also okay. I mean, if I come to HDFC and say please close my account, that is okay. It's not a problem. Like,
Yeah, yeah, you can.
collects will stop. If I go over here and I say stop my bank account, it's okay. The payment will fail. Yeah, how does ICICI know that this person is actually who they claim to be? Like Gaurav for HDFC is an actual bank account here.
Yeah.
But how does ICICI trust this bank account?
They don't have to trust, because you when you have to transfer, you also transfer to someone who has a valid UPI ID. So ICIC has authenticated that user address, that UPI ID, and you have the access to that UPI ID. So only thing you need is to authenticate, like using your PIN. You have to give permission that take money from my account, and since it's a valid ID in someone else's account, you can always transfer money, because there is no step of acceptance from a user. Like a user, who has an UPI ID, if they are accepting the money, they don't have to go through a yes step. It directly credits, right? Whereas if you have to send, you have to authenticate, like you have to enter your PIN. So that's why, like, if it is the receiver's account is already authenticated using UPI ID, and while receiving the money, there is no kind of authentication needed, because the UPI ID is already verified and created.
I'm actually starting to think about this. NPCI does not come for every, like you mentioned, it does not come for every transaction. Let's keep it separate. Authentication is kind of done. Uh, However, there is one place where I think NPCI does come in, and that is when user A with a particular address wants to transfer to user B who's connected to this bank. Now, just like a domain name server does not know, if you tell it facebook.com, it doesn't know what is facebook.com. So if I tell you user B transfer here, HDFC Bank does not know what do you mean by that. This address B can be anything. You got a request to transfer from A to B. What is B? A, I understand. That is my bank. I keep those records. But what is B? So I can keep all the bank records of all the people in UPI, but that is crazy. That's why should I? I need some sort of an authority to tell me what this record points to. Which bank does it point to? So that I can give it to them. So I can force them to say at ICICI means send it to a particular bank. But then every time a new bank registers, all existing banks will have to register this bank. Whenever there's a new bank, let's say RBL Bank comes in, then whenever RBL Bank comes in, then all existing banks have to know RBL points to a particular IP address. And if that IP address goes down or something, again, they have to update their own databases, which is crazy. There's thousands of banks with thousands of IP addresses. Many of them go down, come back up. So this address resolution is a problem. That is where NPCI can come in. Whenever I open a new bank, this is interview ready bank, please be careful. So yeah, you come over here to NPCI and you say, you maintain the addresses of all users, right? Gaurav at HDFC, you maintain it. Gaurav at ICICI, you maintain it. So this is like a domain name server in the normal internet. NPCI then maintains this address. Okay, RBL addresses are here. If someone needs to transfer money, then HDFC, if it has it in its local cache, that's okay. I guess if you can cache these addresses just like internet IP addresses are cached as a router. If you don't have it, you can just ask NPCI, where does B point to? So NPCI will know that, B actually points to ICICI Bank. So you'll get a response, and then you can directly, this red line can be fulfilled. Okay. So in this way, the scale is the only scale that is a problem for NPCI is new accounts being created and address resolution.
Right. So if banks start caching, so even in case there is a failure on NPCI side, there would be a fallback if that address is available in the bank cache.
Yes, if it is available in the bank cache, there would be, yes. But if NPCI is down for a very long time, it is still a single point of failure. However, having said that is still better than having a totally distributed system where every bank has to manage this address and also has to manage that where is this address pointing to.
Right. The total availability that NPCI can provide would still be higher than if we would have had a distributed system for all the banks. Like if we combine their availability versus the availability of NPCI, it would still be higher.
Even if we assume there's 100 addresses, that's 700 billion, records, and
Yeah.
each record, let's say, has a 8-byte Aadhaar ID, and then we have 8 bytes for names, and like this, if I keep taking, let's say, I can't think 1,000 bytes for the address.
Yeah, we can just keep it 1 KB.
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah, 1 KB. Oh, actually, they also take the fingerprint and everything, but that's not required. You can link it to an Aadhaar. So yeah, okay. So maybe 1 KB is a good idea. So 7 into 10 raised to the power 11 into 10 raised to the power 3, because it is K, so kilo in bytes. This turns out to be 10 raised to the power 14 bytes. So, okay, this is pretty big. 700 terabytes. Okay,
That was
that's
quick.
that's large. That's large. But having said that, this is all of India having 100 UPI addresses. Right now, I don't think the penetration is even 50%.
For like 700 TB seems like huge, but if you have enough money to put in infra resources, it's not that big of a deal to have this data storage.
Yeah, I can buy a petabyte storage. Like, I can afford it.
Yeah.
So, I think
Right.
I think the government can definitely do it. Having
NPCI
said
can
that, yeah,
definitely have it.
at least the boasting that's going on, yeah, sure, sure, 1 petabyte storage, yeah, nothing.
Okay.
Having said that, it's also not that 700 TB you need a single store. You have a distributed store, and you need some sort of redundancy also. Maybe 3 is too less, but yeah, a few petabytes is not going to take down our economy. Yeah, sure.
This is okay, Gaurav. The estimation looks fine. Can you talk about how would that flow look like?
Okay, so what would happen is, if you need a collect request, you need somebody else to pay for you. They need to get a notification. Maybe in a nice way in the UI, you can say that this is the amount that you need to transfer to UPI address XYZ. So
Right.
using my PIN, I authenticate that I'm a real user who wants a collect. It goes to HDFC Bank. HDFC Bank then says, okay, who do you want to collect from? So I want to collect from user A to user B. So now the arrow is inverted. That's the only major difference. The bank goes and checks in NPCI whether B exists and where does it exist. So then we go to B, which is in ICICI. We get a collect request here on our app. So ICICI has to tell the user, has to send a notification somehow that you have gotten a collect request. If we are able to send a notification to this user on their client device, then we are sorted, because the moment they click on that and they send they authenticate using their PIN, again the same flow starts from A to B.
Yes.
So
Yep.
so we just need to send a notification on their device. How do we do this?
Yeah.
Um,
What would be the key step there in doing that collect?
yeah, a request object can be created which clearly states what are the things that I need in this collect request. So I am Adani Electricity. I need for so and so month, maybe a description exists. For that electricity bill, I need 3,000 rupees transferred. So this is basically a description of the collect request to an address B. And it is authenticated also. So it's authenticated collect request. I can't fire it from my college land.
Okay.
But how do I know where B is? ICICI somehow needs to know, or somebody needs to know where B is, because this request has to go on somebody's mobile. So
Yes.
how do I
But
know that this is the right thing? Yeah, sorry.
you are forgetting about the part of somebody's mobile is actually using an application that is being managed by one of the payment service providers.
Yes, yes. So I'm just wondering, if this request comes to ICICI, how do they know which app am I connected to? So if I am using GPay, Google Pay, the notification has to come here.
Yes.
Somebody needs to tell them that this account is being used by Gaurav in this GPay, in this address.
Yeah. And we know who is that somebody here, right? You know who is that somebody who is actually orchestrating all of this.
Some listener needs to be there. Some sort of polling mechanism or some sort of pushing mechanism which tells that if a request comes to this address, please notify me. So the UPI app provider in this case, which is GPay, might have a server where whenever a request comes here, It tells ICICI, if it comes, please let me know. I will handle.
Are you sure that GPay will tell ICICI that I have a collect request from a user?
No, I mean to say, GPay has to tell ICICI that if this user has a collect request, you tell me
Okay.
on this
So
end.
let's go on this step by step. The merchant, let's say Airtel, asks GPay or any payment service provider that go collect money from this user, UPI ID user, right? So payment system authenticates that Airtel is like a real user, and that user is asking money from another user. So now, who would GPay go to in order to find out, do I even have authority to ask this user to send money to my requester? Who would be that entity?
I'm thinking of NPCI, but having said
Yes,
that,
you're going in the right direction then.
okay, if the request comes to ICICI Bank and they have the collect request, I'm just wondering, should I have some sort of a listener or a webhook or something that if the request comes for this account, connect with me on GPay and I will pay you.
You have written the mechanism there. So NPCI is the correct entity who is actually going to handle this, and it is going to use one of the mechanisms that you have listed there. You have listed two mechanisms: listening, polling, and pushing.
Okay, I think I'm understanding now. So instead of ICICI Bank doing this, the request goes to NPCI, which gets this
Yes.
collect request, and then
Yes.
any client can actually come and say, if this UPI address gets a collect request, please let me know. So then
Yes. So
NPCI will have to handle this.
yes, and NPCI would push it to the ICICI that this is your user has to pay so and so amount, and this is the address. So basically, NPCI should be issuing a debit request for a particular user to that bank.
Even if the bank gets it, right? For example, I get it on my mobile phone with the GPay
Yeah,
app. So I'm just
yeah.
wondering if HDFC got the request, went to NPCI, said that, I need B to pay me. So Adani sent me
Yes.
a request. I now, NPCI has to somehow connect with my GPay.
Yes. So NPCI will connect to your bank using your virtual address and say that, listen, ICICI, your this B user of yours with this virtual address has to pay so much, so and so amount. You have to debit that amount. And then that ICICI is again going to connect to the similar entity who has actually initiated the request. Who would be that entity?
Okay, there are two questions I have here. One is, why is NPCI coming in between? It's just a address resolution authority. Because anyway, it will authenticate requests or show you where the addresses are, and the banks themselves can do the authentication
You
for
answered it yourself. NPCI is just coming into the picture for virtual addresses, for routing.
routing. Yes, you're right. Yeah. Okay. So now that ICICI has actually got the request after the routing is finished, I'm wondering, how do these guys talk to GPay? Like, my mobile
Yes.
has GPay, so
So you know yourself, you mentioned that when Adani is making a request, they have a you are interacting with GPay, right? And they have the payment service provider. So the actually, to the person to whom the money is requested, they will also have their own analogous PSP. So then the bank has to just go to that PSP and push the request.
okay, okay. So now this can be GPay, this can be Razorpay.
Could be anything
This
depending on the user.
so these guys have their own server which pulls from. I would think this is ICICI actually. I think this would be any bank which gets a collect request. Then either GPay or Razorpay, depending on the type of collect. So let's say it is at the moment at GPay.
Yeah.
So Google Pay says that this request is mine. That is one way of doing it. Another thing is
Yep.
to say that, yeah, this address belongs to me. So whenever an address like this comes, I am somehow authorized to pull these requests. So there are two things I can do. One, I can put this on the mobile, saying that, I'm going to be polling the ICICI Bank from time to time. It's a inefficient method. Ideally, I would like the server to send me these notifications.
The push, yeah, yeah.
So what GPay will probably do is it has a server which talks to ICICI Bank, says that these addresses are linked to me. Whenever there's a collect request, please talk to me. So ICICI says, who the hell are you? Who are you, right? So some sort of authentication has to happen beforehand, before it can start pulling requests from here. And I think that authentication happens in the app itself. The first time when you register
When you register, yeah.
your address, that time you are basically authorizing this server to connect on your behalf.
Yeah. So now let's close the loop because still the transaction is not complete, right? The request has been raised, got routed to the bank of the requester, to the NPCI, to the bank of the payee, and came to the device. Now what happens?
So once the request has come to the device, which gets this notification from the server, we know that there has to be a payment which has to be made. You now connect to your bank, sending a pay request, where we are clearly saying B is now transferring to A.
Yeah.
This is ICICI. It checks whether B actually exists by connecting with NPCI. NPCI gives a successful response. B and A both exist, maybe.
Yep.
ICICI also checks whether actually B authentication is taken care of by ICICI. I'm making a mistake here. Where does A exist? Address. That is asked to NPCI. NPCI gives A's address, which happens to be in HDFC. ICICI now transfers the money to the account B. Let's say there is an account A in HDFC.
Okay.
And we are sorted.
Yeah, there is just one. So the money has been transferred, right? The credit request has been requested. The requester's account gets credited, the payer's account gets debited. Now there is one last step that still has to be done once this transaction completes.
Right. I think a notification has to be sent
To whom?
to A from here.
And why not B?
We also need to send it to B. So once this transaction, you're right. In fact, they need some sort of a successful response. Otherwise, who knows what happened. So
Right,
I guess
right.
when the transaction is complete between these two banks, they have to send a success to B, saying that payment is successful, and at the same time they have to send it to A, saying that payment is successful.
Correct.
Okay, B is easy. B, you just send a response back, and the app handles it. It's a success. A needs a notification, which is very similar to how a notification was sent for a collect request.
Yep.
You can find out which payment gateway is handling this. Send them a successful payment
Correct.
notification, and then they can send it to the app.
Yes. Now the loop is closed.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, first of all, we need to exchange feedback. So I would, before I share my feedback with you, I would like to ask one last question. How did you find the interview?
Okay. Yeah, it was really, really good. It felt more of a discussion than an interview because I felt that whenever I was stuck, you were guiding me and helping me out. There were places where I didn't know what actually happens, like the pin here. Also, when it came to collect requests, I think you kind of helped me walk through the solution. So for me, it was great. Yeah, I felt very positive with the interview. Yes.
Okay, that's okay because I think system design interviews for like senior engineers, staff engineers do happen that way. Maybe little more on the complex side, but most of them are discussions to understand basically how is your approach when it comes to problem solving and understanding of the systems. And the next question would be, how would you rate yourself on this interview? On a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being you absolutely killed it.
I think I was a 3.5 or a 4, um, because it took me time to come up with address resolution, despite having read about NPCI and the payments. I think I had to come up with the solution. In that way, it is impressive. I found the solution mid interview, but in a way, it is maybe these are common design patterns that I should already know about. So yeah, I would pass myself, but I would say there is scope for improvement. Yeah, that's how I would put it.
Okay. Okay. So my rating for you would have been 3.8. So you're like correct. You landed correctly. And I think it is very important for any interviewer and the candidate themselves to be self aware. And you have like, these are the points that I also like thought could have been improved, like the collect and especially the authentication. But then with subtle hints, you were able to actually close the solutions. So that's a good sign. That's a positive.
Kind of a higher, kind of like, not sure, like.
No, that's why companies have like 10 interviews. So then they collect feedback of all the 10 interviews together and then
Cool, cool. So
okay.
this is great. Thanks, Yogita, for making this possible. Thank you for coming. We learned a lot about designing systems like UPI, like payment gateways. And I'm sure the audience found it useful. Guys, if you found it useful, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. Please subscribe to Yogita's channel, hit the like button wherever you like over there. Don't hit it twice, otherwise, it goes away.
Thank you so much, Gaurav, for inviting me to the channel again. And I think UPI was a problem that not many people were discussing. And when we thought of it, I think it was a good idea to bring this out to everyone so that people can actually understand how this great system has been built. And also, I would recommend everyone to actually go and check out Interview Ready. I myself use it for enhancing my knowledge sometimes, even if I'm not preparing for interviews. So please go check it out. And thanks, Gaurav, again.
Thank you. Thank you.